Alabama just passed their own ESA program.
Oh, wow.
It's called the CHOOSE Act.
Interesting.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So Alabama's actually the 14th state to jump on this ESA train.
Yeah, it seems like ESAs are gaining a lot of traction all over the country.
Yeah, for sure. This isn't just like a small little experiment anymore.
Right.
This is a pretty big shift in how we think about education.
Yeah.
Especially in Alabama.
Yeah.
So we want to do a deep dive into this CHOOSE Act.
Okay.
Figure out how it works, who it's going to help, and what it all means for the future of education here.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah. All right, so let's start with the basics.
Okay.
When did this thing actually become law?
Well, Governor Ivey actually signed the CHOOSE Act back in March.
Okay.
But it doesn't actually start until the 2025-2026 school year.
That gives everybody some time to get ready.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Hopefully it makes for a smooth launch.
Makes sense. So how much money are we talking about here?
Oh, so there are two different paths.
Okay.
If your kid goes to a regular public or private school,
Yeah.
you'd get $7,000 every year for each student
Wow.
to cover, all the approved educational expenses.
That's per student.
Per student, yeah.
Okay.
But if you're homeschooling,
Mm-hmm.
it's $2,000 per student
Oh.
every year,
Okay.
up to $4,000 total for the whole family.
So homeschooling families get less. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to the fact that homeschooling usually costs less overall. You know?
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, lower overhead. And the family cap, that makes sure the money is spread out fairly
Right.
between families of different sizes.
So it's about balance, flexibility, but also managing the program costs.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we get into all those approved expenses,
Okay.
which is where it gets really interesting.
Let's talk about who's actually eligible for these ESAs.
Yeah, because I'm guessing not everyone qualifies.
You got it. They're doing a phased rollout,
Okay.
prioritizing certain groups in the first year.
So who gets in first?
Well, the first 500 ESAs are specifically for students with special needs.
Okay.
This recognizes that those students often need,
Yeah.
specialized learning and support,
Yeah,
and that can be really expensive and hard to find,
for sure.
especially in the traditional system.
It's great that they're giving those families more control.
I think so, too. And, it's something we see in other states with ESAs, too.
Right.
A real focus on giving options to students who haven't really done well in those traditional settings.
Okay, so after students with special needs,
Then it's children of active duty military,
makes sense.
especially the ones in what they call priority school zones.
Oh,
This is a really important thing to consider
yeah.
because military families, they move around a lot, right?
Yeah.
And their kids have to switch schools all the time.
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
So having that extra flexibility to
Mhm.
personalize their education could make a big difference.
Huge. Okay, and after those two groups.
The less the ESAs.
Mm.
They go out based on income,
Okay,
prioritizing families at or below 300% of the federal poverty level.
so they're making sure this is accessible
Mhm.
to a wide range of families,
Exactly.
not just those who could already afford private school.
That's the goal.
I like that.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's eligible and wants to apply, how do they do it?
Well, the whole process is handled through the Alabama Department of Revenue,
Okay,
and they have a website, chooseact.alabama.gov.
got it.
And they've even got a guide there to help you with all the documents you need.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's chooseact.alabama.gov. And when's the application window?
It opens on January 2nd, 2025, and runs until April 7th.
Okay,
And you'll know if you got in by May 1st.
gotcha.
Plenty of time to get organized.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so once a family gets accepted, then what?
That's when the real fun begins.
What do you mean fun?
Well, that's when you get to decide how to use those ESA funds.
Oh, okay.
And the list of approved expenses, it's surprisingly broad.
Like what?
You could pay for tuition,
Yeah.
tutoring textbooks, educational therapies,
Wow.
technology, even
Right.
some extracurriculars are covered.
So you can really tailor your child's education to fit their needs.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
It's a level of control most parents have never had before.
it really is. And it opens up so many possibilities.
I can't wait to hear more about those. But first, I think we need a quick break. Okay, so we're back, and we know who qualifies for the CHOOSE Act, how the funding works, all that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what you can actually do with this money. Like, what are the options?
This is where it gets really fun. It's not just about paying for private school. You can actually create like a totally custom education for your kid.
Okay, give me some examples.
Sure, you could cover the traditional stuff like tuition and fees for a private school.
Mm.
But let's say your child needs extra help in math.
Yeah.
You could use the ESA funds to hire a tutor.
Oh, that's smart.
Or maybe your kid's a coding whiz.
Okay.
You could use the money for advanced coding classes, or even like a summer tech camp.
So it's about filling in the gaps, the stuff that regular schools might not offer.
Exactly. And think about kids who learn differently.
Yeah.
Maybe they need educational therapy
Right.
or assistive technology.
Things like that.
The Choose Act could make those things possible
Yeah, that's huge.
when they might not have been before.
I struggled with reading in school.
Really?
I wish I had something like this back then.
Yeah, I think it's so important to recognize that, one size doesn't fit all
For sure.
when it comes to education.
So there must be some limits, right?
Of course. It can't just be a free-for-all.
What are the rules?
There are definitely rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Not every expense is going to get approved.
Okay.
But the list is pretty broad.
Like what?
Textbooks, educational software, even transportation costs
Really?
for educational activities.
So if my kid needs to travel
Ugh.
for a special music program or something, that could be covered.
Exactly.
Wow.
And to help families figure all this out, there's a Choose Act provider directory.
Okay.
It's basically a list of approved providers and services.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, so you can see who's out there.
Yeah.
And what they offer.
So it's not really just school anymore. It's more like creating your own educational adventure.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. Imagine combining traditional classes with specialized programs for whatever your kid's into.
Yeah.
Whether it's robotics or art or chess.
It's like building your own personalized learning plan
Yes, like putting together a puzzle.
with all the pieces you need.
And each kid's puzzle is going to be different.
Right.
Which is a huge shift
Yeah.
from that one-size-fits-all approach we see so often.
I think this could be amazing for kids who haven't done well in traditional schools.
Yeah.
Gifted learners.
Yeah.
Students with learning disabilities. Even kids who just learn better in a different environment.
Absolutely. It's not just about addressing needs. It's about letting every child explore their passions.
And really dive deep into what they love.
Yeah. It's about nurturing a love of learning.
Instead of just checking boxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is great for individual kids and families. But what about the bigger picture? How could the Choose Act affect the entire education system?
Well, when you bring in this element of choice and competition, it can actually push schools to get better.
To up their game.
Right. They have to innovate and improve to stay competitive.
So it's not just taking resources away from public schools, it's making them better.
Exactly. And remember the Choose Act. It prioritizes students with special needs and those from lower income families, the groups that often face the biggest challenges.
So it's not just about creating more choices, it's about making sure everyone has access to those choices.
That's the goal.
I love that.
Now, of course, this is all brand new.
Right.
It's too early to say for sure what the long-term effects will be.
It's like a giant experiment. We'll have to see how it plays out. Speaking of watching closely, I've heard some concerns about accountability.
Yeah.
When you're talking about public money.
Yeah.
Transparency is key. How can we be sure the ESA funds are being used properly?
That's a great question, and it's an important one. There are systems in place to prevent misuse.
Okay.
The Alabama Department of Revenue, they're responsible for overseeing the whole program.
Got it.
And making sure everyone follows the rules.
So there are specific guidelines for what you can spend the money on?
Exactly.
And the providers have to meet certain standards to be part of the program.
Right. It's not just a free-for-all.
Good.
And there will be ongoing evaluations to see how effective the program is and make changes if needed.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So beyond all the practical stuff, the Choose Act also brings up some bigger questions about the role of education in our society.
Yeah, it really does.
It's not just about the mechanics of the program. It's about what we value.
What we believe education should be.
Is it about individual choice and customization? Or is there a benefit to a shared public education system?
That's the big question, isn't it?
And there's no easy answer.
Nope. This is a debate that's been going on forever.
And the Choose Act just adds another layer to it.
For sure.
It makes us think
Yeah.
about how to balance the needs of individual students with the goals of education as a whole. Things like preparing citizens,
Yeah.
fostering critical thinking, promoting social mobility.
Right. It all comes back to that.
What kind of society do we want to create? And what role should education play?
Big questions.
So what does all this mean for our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged.
Yeah.
This is a conversation that's going to keep evolving, and we need to have thoughtful discussions about it.
Don't just take our word for it. Do your own research. Read different perspectives.
Yeah.
And form your own opinions.
Exactly. Talk to people, your friends and family, your community.
Yeah.
Engage in those conversations, even when you disagree.
Because this affects all of us. whether we have kids in school or not. The future of education in Alabama is being shaped right now.
Huh?
And we all have a role to play.
We do.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into Alabama's Choose Act. We've explored the program itself, the potential pros and cons, and the bigger questions it raises about the purpose of education.
Yeah.
We hope this episode has given you a better understanding of this complex issue. And if you want to learn more, we'll be sharing links to resources in the show notes, including the Choose Act website, the Alabama State Department of Education, and organizations with different viewpoints on this topic.
Sounds good.
And remember, this conversation doesn't end here. Share your thoughts with us on social media. We want to hear from you. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.
Okay, so let's be real. Anytime there's a big change, especially in something like education,
Right.
people are going to have opinions,
Yeah.
strong ones. And the Choose Act, it's definitely stirring things up. It is. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that there are valid concerns on both sides of this issue.
Yeah, for sure.
Change can be scary.
Yeah.
It's totally natural for people to have questions and maybe even some anxiety
Mm.
about what this program could mean for education in Alabama.
So let's talk about those concerns.
Okay.
What are people worried about?
Well, one of the biggest ones is the potential impact on public schools.
Okay.
Some folks are arguing that,
Yeah.
diverting funds to ESAs could actually weaken public education.
Especially in areas where resources are already tight.
Exactly, like rural communities or low-income neighborhoods.
That's a valid point. Public schools are so important.
Yeah, they're the foundation of the system.
We can't let them crumble.
Absolutely. And that's why these conversations are so important. We
Right.
need to carefully consider all the angles here.
All the potential consequences.
Now, on the flip side, the people who support the Choose Act, they're saying that competition can actually be good.
Okay.
Good for public schools. They're saying when families have more options, public schools have to step up.
Oh, I see.
They have to innovate, improve what they offer.
So it's not about taking away resources. It's about pushing everyone to do better.
Exactly. And remember, the Choose Act prioritizes certain groups.
Right.
Students with special needs, lower income families.
The ones who often face the most barriers.
So it's about leveling the playing field
Making sure everyone has a chance.
to access a quality education.
Of course, this is a brand new program.
It is.
It's too early to know for sure what the long-term impact will be.
Yeah, we're in uncharted territory here.
Like a big experiment.
Kind of.
We'll just have to watch and see how it unfolds. Another thing I've heard people talking about is accountability
Yeah, that's crucial.
when you're dealing with public funds.
Mhm.
Transparency is essential. How can we be sure these ESA funds are being used responsibly?
That's a really good question. And there are safeguards in place.
Okay.
The Alabama Department of Revenue, they're in charge of overseeing the program.
So they're making sure everyone's following the rules.
Exactly.
And there are clear guidelines
Yes.
for what qualifies as an approved expense, and the providers have to meet certain criteria to even participate.
Right, it's not a free-for-all.
Okay, that's reassuring.
And there will be evaluations to check the program's effectiveness and make adjustments if needed.
So it's not just set it and forget it.
Nope. It's an ongoing process.
Good. Beyond all the practical stuff, the Choose Act also brings up some bigger philosophical questions
Oh, absolutely.
about the role of education in our society.
Yeah, what is the purpose of education?
Is it about individual choice? Customization? Or is there something valuable about a shared public education experience?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And there's no easy answer.
Really?
It's a debate we've been having for a long time.
And the Choose Act, it just adds another layer of complexity.
Sure.
It forces us to think about what we truly value. How do we balance the needs of individual students with the broader goals of education, like preparing citizens, fostering critical thinking, promoting social mobility?
All those big ideas.
What kind of society do we want? And what role should education play in building that society?
Those are the questions we need to be asking.
But what's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged.
Yeah.
This conversation is going to keep going, and we need everyone to participate.
Don't just take our word for it. Do your own research.
Exactly.
Read different perspectives.
Talk to people.
Form your own opinions. And then share those opinions.
Yeah.
Talk to your friends and family.
Yeah.
Your community.
Have those conversations, even when they're tough.
Because this affects us all. whether we
Uh,
have kids in school or not.
the future of education in Alabama, it's being shaped right now.
And we all have a voice in that process.
That's right.
This has been a fascinating look at Alabama's CHOOSE Act. We've explored the program itself, the potential benefits and drawbacks, and the bigger questions it raises about the purpose of education. We hope this episode has given you a better understanding of this complex issue. And if you want to dive deeper, we'll be sharing links to resources in the show notes,
Great.
including the CHOOSE Act website, the Alabama State Department of Education, and organizations that represent different perspectives on this topic. And remember, this conversation doesn't end here. We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts on social media. Join the discussion. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.